Hello, everyone, and welcome back for more of our reading of Fate Strange Fake. We're now on Volume 2, as voted by you all. I did a vote on what I should cover next, whether it's going to be this, or another Melty Blood, or, one of the other things. And pretty much the over 50% said they wanted more Strange Fake, and so, yeah, let's go. I loved Volume 1. Not so much the manga. In fact, I honestly don't even think I'm going to be looking more at the manga, because there's very little I can actually say, and the version in my head I enjoy more. But we're into Volume 2, which I think we got a little bit of a preview of by reading the manga, because it kind of goes into this a little bit. So let's get started. I'm excited to do some more reading, because it's been a bit, and it's a lot of fun. So let's get going here. We have ourselves a picture to go off of here first. So let me just see here. So we have Teen Shelk, daughter of a tribe native to Snowfield, forms a contract. Yep, we know that. And that's meant to be Gil. Are you serious? Are you serious that that's meant to be Gil? Well, man looks, I mean, I guess it's kind of his casual look, but even then, it's like a different version of his casual look that I'm not really used to. You know? Servant who possesses the strongest noble phantasm. True identity is Gilgamesh, right? Okay. That's kind of our starting page there. Volume 2. So there we go. Fate Strange Fake by Ryogo Narita, whose work is real spanky. Okay, so, oh god, the chapters are a problem again, kind of. Okay, well, we'll definitely read through the interlude, which is not actually that new of an interlude for us, because we actually heard this story in Hollow Ataraxia. In fact, that there's a visual novel component to it, which is very cool. The Heroic Spirit Incident, Ensemble vs. Illusion, A Battle Without Heroic Spirits, The Showdown in the Dark, Two Archers, Two of them, what? And then The Bridge, One Day in the Forest. Okay, so the first thing we're looking at is the interlude, The Little Red Riding Hood of Semina Apartments. All right. Gonna need to zoom in just a little bit. I think I usually go to 123 as my number here. Okay. Interlude. The Red Riding Hood of Semina Apartments. It was the kind of ghost story you might hear anywhere. There's a place called Fuyuki. A large river runs through the center of the town, splitting it into the urban new city, where skyscrapers and shopping malls stand in rows, and Miyamacho, where homes and nature from the old days remain mostly untouched. A provincial city that incorporates a variety of hues on the same land. But this land has another face. It is one of Japan's foremost sacred grounds, a ground that mages of the three families known as the Ainsburns, Tosaka, and Makiri had once refined into the foundation of a certain ritual. In other words, it had become the battlefield of the Holy Grail War. The land where all sorts of lives and deaths, miracles and ruinations had been repeated over the course of 5 repetitions of the ritual. But several years had passed since the 5th Holy Grail War, and Fuyuki was wrapped in an atmosphere of genuine peace far from its savagery. Then again, this was probably just on the surface. But at the very least, the high school students who busied themselves with club activities were relaxed enough to enjoy idle banter during their breaks. Homurahara Academy, in front of this archery dojo. It was a short time after school. The members of the archery club were whiling away their break with childish gossip. I'm telling you, it's true. A long time ago, a ghost in a kimono used to show up at the Rito Temple. That's your boy, Assassin, right? That's Sasaki Kojiro. News to me. A long time ago? You mean it's gone now? Yeah, I hear even people with a spirit sense or whatever can't see a thing. Did it pass on? Well, it is a temple. Speaking of which, wasn't there a rumor there's an alligator snapping turtle in the temple pond? As they continue to trade stories about between urban legends and idle gossip, one girl brought up a local ghost story of recent date. Hey, do you know the Red Riding Hood of Semina Apartments? The ghost story of Mitsuzuri's? Yeah, that's the one. Oh, were you there when she told it? Then the confused underclassmen cut into their seniors' conversation. Oh, I don't know that one. Mitsuzuri? You mean the OB? Who drops by to hang out once in a while? What is an OB? What is an OB? Out of bounds? OB definition. Nope. Japan. OB. Old boy or old girl. Former students. Okay. Oh, that's funny. They're calling her an OB that instead of OG. That's funny, but it's in character. The upperclassmen who had introduced the topic then began... It's sort of like how JK and JC are used, right? The upperclassmen who had introduced the topic then began to tell the ghost story with apparent relish. Yeah, it's a ghost story she once told me. You know how there's this place called Semina Apartments in Kurokizaka over in New City? Soon, however, she wiped the smile from her face and continued in a hushed tone, because she knew that the ghost story was tied to an actual double suicide that had taken place just a few years before. This is just a rumor that spread from those apartments, but... The urban legend, when told without its ghost story embellishments, was quite simple. A married couple moved into Semina Apartments in Kurokizaka. They had a daughter who was constantly abused, a little girl who always wore a red hood. Their neighbor, noticed the girl's situation, but ignored it as none of his business. Their relationship was far from intimate and consisted entirely of the girl, who could no longer raise her arms due to the abuse she had suffered, asking him to push the button in the elevator. To the young girl, however, the neighbor who pushed the button for her seemed probably far more dependable than her parents. And so, when the young girl's mother tried to force double suicide on her, she fled all covered in blood, sought help from her neighbor. She knocked on his door over and over, hoping to be saved. However, thought it was probably just the usual abuse, and ignored it. It's someone else's problem, he thought. It's got nothing to do with me, he thought. No matter how many times she beat on his door, he continued to ignore it. As far as the runaway girl was concerned, there was no one for her to turn to. But however, turned away from the girl's heartbroken cries, from the girl's life. He turned up the volume on his television and shut himself up in his own little world. After all, it was somebody else's problem. Thus, the little girl was betrayed by the person she had trusted the most. The next day, the corpses of the couple were discovered, but for some reason the girl's whereabouts remained unknown. She had suddenly disappeared, leaving behind only the marks of blood loss so copious she could not have survived. The sounds of abuse from the next-door apartment were no more, but in their place, a late-night knocking sound came to trouble A. Then one night, when he could no longer bear it, A opened the door, and there stood a girl in a red hood. With a bloody face, she said, "Come on, push the button." So, full disclosure, I now live in an apartment. It's a new thing for me. I used to live in, houses back in Canada. I'm not going to say that there's abuse going on at, the neighbor's house, because that's absolutely, I don't think, the case. But boy, do they definitely have screaming matches with a child over homework and stuff. And, boy, this kind of hits a bit close to home. Thankfully, I sleep too well that there will never be noises in the night to wake me up. They could knock on my front door, I would absolutely sleep through it. I'm far enough away that that's not an issue. And that's the story. The girl finished telling the tale roughly as she remembered it. A babble of exasperated voices broke out from the other club members beside her. It's not even scary when you tell it. I guess even when the story's the same, it loses a lot with a different teller. How bad you are at telling it is the scariest part if you ask me. The storyteller, getting a round of boos from her classmates who knew the story, waved hands in protest. I told you I couldn't do it like Mitsuzuri. She really pulls you into the stuff. Yeah, the way she set the stage with the long hallway and stuff was amazing. Wait a minute, when he opened the door, Red Riding Hood wasn't there at all. She was standing at the hallway when he turned around. Oh, is that how it went? It was! And you skipped over all kinds of other stuff too, like how A liked being alone, his back and forth with the detective. The double suicide really happened, but even that sounds fake when you tell it. Following that speech, other club members began to join the conversation one after another. That was thoughtless. Of course, so is turning a real incident like that into a ghost story. Wait, the double suicide really happened? Now that you mention it, there were all sorts of other weird rumors going around, weren't there? The underclassmen, who had gotten all worked up to hear the ghost story for the first time, only to be told a half-baked version, began to express their dissatisfaction. I wish I could have heard it from that OB instead. Yeah, it's just like you went and blurted out the punchline. It's the worst. The storyteller answered them, cackling. Wow, well, she won't be telling you here at least. What? Her ghost stories were expressly forbidden by Tiger for being too scary. Tiger can't deal with them, you know? Ghost stories? Now you mention it, I heard that someone in the track and field club banned scary stories as well. I think it was because one of the seniors was a huge coward too. Tiger's usually fearless, but I guess she's got some weird mental weaknesses. Just as they uttered the nickname and the woman teacher who acted as an advisor to the archery club, a distant voice boomed. Hey, break time's over! Well, speak of the devil, it's Miss Fujimura. That time already? Oh, the ghost story used up our break time. With a feeling like indigestion, the students rose to resume club activities. As they began getting ready, the remains of the break time conversation were dragged on another few words. What happened to A in the end again? The storyteller surreptitiously inquired of a classmate, possibly ashamed of her own vague recollection. They disappeared, right? Came the careless reply, followed by a light, albeit indiscreet joke. I bet he's still running from Red Riding Hood even now. It was the kind of ghost story you might hear anywhere. Common gossip whispered among the young people of Fuyuki. But the story had a sequel that the rumors did not tell. The continuation of the urban legend was to be spun off in a far foreign land. The Red Riding Hood of Semina Apartments. Its protagonist had been caught up in something far more preposterous than any wild rumor. A Holy Grail war full of lies. It's very interesting that they're bringing this up, right? Chapter 2. The Heroic Spirit Incident. Alright, here we are. The Heroics, Day 0, midnight. Somewhere. Okay? Somewhere. Oh, so that's where you were. You just had to turn up there of all places, my little sacrificial pawn. In the darkness, Francesca slumped her shoulders. Oh, it's Francesca. Slumped her shoulders with an air of boredom and watched the scene reflected in her crystal ball. It was an image of the old Snowfield Opera House. I mean, really, the heroic spirit summoned there is sure to be art. Art? In the image, you could see the figure of a lone girl stealthily creeping into the opera house. I wish you'd gone to Sigma's place. Like for Megman? Who's Sigma? Sigma balls. They have a strong uncertainty factor. The synergy would have made things much more interesting. The girl dressed in Gothic Lolita clothes grumbled to herself, then immediately regained her smile as she continued. Well, maybe it's for the best. I just had an idea for a fun game. She contacted someone with Magecraft and then returned her attention to the crystal. She had been staring listlessly at it in the dark for 10 minutes when a powerful light shone from the crystal. That moment, she noticed a peculiarity in the image that made her eyes sparkle. Oh, what's this? Now who could that be? Assassin, perhaps? The words were barely out of her mouth when another change came over the image. Francesca stared excitedly at the corpse in the crystal ball and let out a cackling laugh. Amazing, stupendous, a sudden accident. I wonder what will happen next. Francesca flashed an ecstatic grin, her cheeks flushing obscenely while her eyes sparkled like a child's. Oh, Art, whatever will you do now? Your master dead the moment you're summoned. Isn't it dramatic? Who is Art? She shouted wildly, and all the while she laughed and laughed and laughed. Catching sight of the next thing reflected in her ball, she cocked her head limply to the side, still smiling. What's this? Then, her head full of question marks, she muttered, Who is that saber? America. Snowfield. We still don't know who he is. Inside the partially collapsed opera house, Ayaka so Seijo, I've noticed that they sometimes use a Y in the name, so it's still Seijo, right? Was cursing her fate. She could not help it, even if she had brought it on herself. Because the circumstances she found herself in seemed like nothing but some god or devil's prank. Lying beside her was a human corpse. There was no external wound, but the man's body was stiff with a look of anguish, as if his heart had been crushed. She could not detect the least sign of life. To Ayaka's eyes, it had appeared that a hand really had crushed his heart, but the heart was gone now, and there was no trace of a tear in his shirt, let alone a wound on his chest. And the someone who crushed his heart was gone as well. She had been forced to retreat by the mysterious man who had appeared before Ayaka's eyes. The story goes back a bit. A few minutes ago, Ayaka was prisoner. So that's the last thing we saw in the manga, was her as prisoner. It didn't say how she got prisoner, but that's the final thing we saw there. She had been bound from head to toe with a magical cord belonging to what the corpse had been before it became a corpse, a mage. It must have taken me lightly, indeed, to imagine that you could hide from me like that. The mage sounded shocked. He scrutinized Ayaka's body all over, and tilted his head. Those marks look like command seals. So you're the one Faldius mentioned. What are you after? No idea. A weird white woman told me to come. So I came. A white woman. Ayaka's tone was brusque. Her eyes were brimming with resignation at the world and anger at her unreasonable situation. The mage saw that, shrugged inwardly, and continued with apparent interest. I see. I suppose that makes you a poor stray mage made into a sacrificial pawn for the Einsburn flesh puppet. Well, I can't have you getting in the way of the ritual. Sorry, but I'm going to deal with you first. The mage sent mana surging through the magic circuits that crisscrossed his body, and was about to end Ayaka's life without emotion, like it was just work, when... He suddenly halted and touched a finger, that's supposed to be finger, to an earring, which seemed to be a magical implement of some kind. Yes. This woman? Why? He seemed to be conversing with someone through the earring, but Ayaka could not hear the other side of the conversation. I see. Understood. I'll play along with your game. Once he ended the call, the mage let out a big sigh, and turned back to face the still-bound Ayaka. It may be mere whim, but I can't say I'm not interested. Oh, I'm gonna see how much loyalty the heroic spirit I'm about to summon will swear to me. The mage's what? Something twisted slightly, and he stifled a chuckle as he continued. I want to know whether or not the noble hero once hailed as the king of knights of the round table will obey an order to kill a defenseless woman. All Ayaka managed to understand was that she was probably going to be killed by the noble hero who was about to be summoned. And if this whatever of the round table refuses to kill me, I still won't be spared, will I? Ayaka spoke cynically and without enthusiasm. I could always use a command seal, but unfortunately I'm not enough of a hedonist to waste one on a game. I'll snap your neck with that cord. Are you sure that's wise? If you don't kill me first, I might ruin your ritual. Your voice is shaking. Don't bluff. The mage maintained his air of indifference in this face of Ayaka's half-desperate sarcasm. Do you know why I just as good as told you the true name of the heroic spirit I'm going to summon? I did it because this summoning is another declaration of war. Doesn't matter if it gets out. On the contrary, I hear will make for a grand irony when it gets back to the Einsburns and the association through your employer. Totally useless if you ask me, but I get paid all the same. Among mages, it was basic common sense to conceal information, but this mage only shrugged as he continued relating his commission to spread it. In short, you've already made allowances for the infiltration you've gambled your life on. Speaking of which, I would have liked to make sure whether or not those faux command seals have the power to obstruct my summoning, but really, I'm sure Francesca sees us just as another one of her toys. Well, if you do put up a fight and spoil a ritual, I still get paid. I'll just accept that I drew the short straw and give up on the war. Ayaka silently lowered her eyes, feeling the portion of the magical cord that was constricting her neck twitch. There's a bunch of typos. I wonder if there's a 0.2 fixed version of this, because it's so far been slightly rougher than the first one, but oh well. For elements, silver and iron. For foundations, stone and the Archduke of Contracts. The succession of words meant nothing to Ayaka. At the same time, it was a countdown to her death. For ancestor, my great master... blank. Oh, it's too soon. Ayaka groaned softly, listening to the mage's chant as though it was none of her concern. So, my dramatic escape ends in a place like this. For the alighting wind, a wall. The gates of the four directions close. Is this a simple trick of fate, or is it her curse? She thought she would prefer the latter if possible. Well, if it is, I wonder if this will be enough to satisfy her. She thought there being a reason for it would make it all just a little more bearable, as if running from reality she was about to die. Suddenly she noticed the currents of strange power that flowed through her body as the mage's chant filled the hall. It felt like all the blood in her body had become iron and she was feeling the pull of an external magnet. Soon, Ayaka realized that the pulsation was not in her veins, but came from 5 tattoos inscribed on various parts of her body. Deep resentment or great joy. She hallucinated that her entire body, with tattoos as its focal points, was emitting a cry. Little by little, the cry grew louder, drowning out the mage's chant. The mage, however, did not seem to notice the change. He was alert, keeping up a continuous flow of mana to her magical restraints, but it appeared he had no intention of interrupting his summoning ritual. But then, even if some grand magecraft was invoked, Ayaka did not think it would be safe to bring any optimistic developments, like incapacitating the mage or automatically warping her to a safe place. Couldn't be self-destruction, could it? Either way, her own death was almost certain. The fact sent a wave of fear coursing through Ayaka, and along with it, a craving. I don't want to die. But even those feelings seemed somehow like they were happening to someone else. I don't want to die? Why? What reason have I got to live? Ayaka could not tell whether it was her brain raising these doubts, or whether it was the tattoos inscribed on her arms and the curse of the white woman. The curse of the white woman had built into them, making it do so. We really don't know what's up with this white woman. The noise of the tattoos had grown so loud it had paralyzed her basic powers of judgment. They seemed to be cheering or screaming as if to welcome something that was about to appear. Then, the next instant, corporeal death swept down on the Opera House stage. But not on Ayaka. Behind the mage who was set to be her executioner. Emerge from the ring of restraint, O guardian of the scales? How long had it been there? To Ayaka's eyes at least, it looked as if it had materialized out of thin air. A petite human figure swathed in shadow black robes. Ayaka could see its whole body was covered in black cloth, but she could not make out the face. All she remembered clearly was the moment a weirdly long arm stretched through the gap in the robes came to a rest on the chest of the victim. As soon as she saw that, Ayaka knew that the situation she found herself in no longer belonged to the world she knew. It was on the other side of the world's shadow, invisible to the eyes of those who led ordinary human lives. The moment she realized that, a diminutive human figure appeared in her field of view. A young girl wearing a red hood. Whether she was actually a phantom or a real image, Ayaka in her confusion could not tell. Why here? The building doesn't even have an elevator. The thing that had appeared on the Opera House stage looked as if it was standing on the corpse. It faced Ayaka with an innocent smile. Even before she knew what that smile meant, dread ran through Ayaka from head to toe. It was hard to say which came first, the almost audible shiver that ran down Ayaka's spine, or the black-robed intruder crushing the heart-like thing that appeared in its hand. The mage vomited blood, still not comprehending what happened to his body. It was doubtful even if he had realized what had killed him. Ayaka was terrified both of the black-robed figure and the girl in red, but at the same time she was thinking detached, somehow impersonal thoughts, like, oh, I'd hate it if they got the wrong idea that I thought I killed him. She probably knew instinctively that she'd be crushed by the fear if she did not. The moment the mage ceased to exist, the magical cord that had been binding Ayaka from head to toe crumbled away. The realization that she was free distracted her for a moment, and in that moment, the girl in red disappeared from her view, and the black-robed figure stood in her place. Her breathing stopped. Are you a mage who seeks the Holy Grail? A mechanical inquiry. When she heard the figure's voice, a chill so intense that what she had felt earlier could not compare shot through Ayaka like countless needles. From the voice, Ayaka could tell the figure was a young woman, maybe even younger than herself, but the sense of presence the woman's body gave off was incomparably colder, sharper, and more oppressive than the mage who had threatened to kill her. Even though she had never encountered this being before, there were things that she felt sure of. If I answer wrong, I'll be killed. If I lie, I'll probably be killed too. The woman had no intent to kill her yet, but if Ayaka made one wrong choice, she would not have the time to sense that change before she ended up like the mage whose corpse lay on the floor in front of her. Having arrived at the conclusion, Ayaka decided to give the black-robed woman an honest answer. Just then, a surge of light enveloped the stage. The black-robed woman was on her guard and jumped back out of the light, but Ayaka, who'd only just been released from her restraints, could not even stand. The best she could do was squint in the direction the light seemed to come from. There was a figure in the light. Multiple human figures. Ayaka could not believe her eyes. The scene only lasted a few seconds, but time in that space seemed to have stopped. Several of the figures kneeled on the spot and welcomed the darkest figure to appear. As light faded, multiple figures vanished before Ayaka could notice them go, and only the last and most vivid figure remained. A blond man, still young and magnificently dressed. Here and there, his golden hair was broken by streaks of red, and a pair of blazing, bestial eyes were set in his beautiful face. Just as Ayaka had been able to sense an almost palpable death from the black-robed woman, who now glared at the man from a very short distance away, she could sense an extraordinary heat from the man who had appeared in the light. The man surveyed his surroundings wide-eyed and said, "Well now, this looks just a bit out of the common." After he glanced at the mage's corpse lying at the feet and the black-robed woman who regarded him warily, the man continued with a broad grin. "The way you're dressed and the flow of power I sensed just now. Are you a follower of the old man of the mountain by any chance?" "Huh!" The atmosphere instantly changed. The man's words sounded like nonsense to Ayaka, but they seemed to strike a chord with the black-robed woman. "Either way, as long as we both seek the Grail, we must be enemies. What will you do?" No sooner had the words left his mouth than the black-robed woman sprung into action with a surge of murderous intent. It was like a shadow on the ground had leapt in the air. She bounded into the wings in a single breath and left after images in her wake as she darted between the pillars that encircled the stage. When she flew past gaps in the curtains, it created the illusion that she had split into dozens of people. "Ha! Magnificent! I've never seen anyone lighter-footed than Locksley before." Who? It's okay, because the man, eyes sparkling like a child, shouted a name Ayaka did not recognize. Yep, me neither, and praised the black-robed woman as she flitted about, glaring death at him. As if he had taken his praise as a challenge, the woman leapt still faster, and then suddenly vanished into thin air. She disappeared? Ayaka murmured, dumbfounded, and looked up. Just then, the black-robed woman appeared from the blind spot of everyone there. She jumped out behind the man, not from above the stage, but out of the shadow he casts on the floor. A weirdly long arm stretched from her back and made for the center of the man's back, just above his heart. An arm of clear death, identical to the one that had slaughtered the mage just a minute before. But the arm never reached the man's body. An arrow, fired from nowhere, sent it flying off course. The black-robed woman's eyes widened slightly in surprise. As far as he was concerned, the blow had come from a complete blind... As she was concerned, rather. The blow had come from a complete blind spot. For you see, the arrow had suddenly appeared at the man's feet. Indeed, from within the shadow he cast on the stage. Interesting. Interesting. Ha! Being compared not to your liking, but splendid work as always, the aristocratic young man muttered to no one in particular, then drew his sword with a smile. It was exquisitely wrought. Even Ayaka could tell it was the kind of sword that royalty used. Then, still smiling, he let out a cry and swung. Something caliber. Soul Calibur. That'd be... Dude, if it's called Soul Calibur, that'd be so cool. Once again, light enveloped the interior of the opera house. It surged from the man's mana-infused sword like a lightning strike and made a beeline for the black-robed woman who was beating a hasty retreat. Then, a violent crash, followed by the sounds of something collapsing, reached Ayaka's ears. When she timidly opened her eyes, she saw the starry sky peeking through the collapsed roof of the partially destroyed opera house. The man addressed the dumbstruck girl. "I ask you, are you my master?" When she heard those words, Ayaka's brain, which had not managed to keep up with the shifting situation, finally began to regain its equilibrium. She reconsidered her situation. It looked like the mage's ritual had been safely accomplished, but the results were nothing like she had been told. According to the white woman, who had brought her here against her will, the ritual was supposed to conjure up the ghost of some ancient heroic spirit, something like that anyway. The white woman had called it a heroic spirit, but she also said that there would only be one of them. So why had she been able to see multiple figures in the light earlier? Had it been the man himself who fired the arrow when he was in danger? Ayaka's doubts came in rapid succession, but soon she ceased to care. As her head cooled, she realized the position she had been placed in and felt nauseous. The mage's corpse lay before her eyes. He had died, right in front of her, just like that. The man looked at the corpse again, or corpse too, but he just tilted his head a little to the side and addressed her again. There was no sign that it came as any particular shock. Be at ease. It doesn't seem any of the common people were caught up in it. On the other hand, it appears that the rebel escaped as well. She did well to get clean away from me. Still, there's no going back now. Was a person's death normal to him? Ayaka found that hard to accept. Oh, I see now. So this is the kind of thing that the white woman wanted me to do. Participate in the Holy Grail War, she said. And of course it's normal for people to die in a war. She wondered how it came to this, how things ended up this way, how she ended up leading this kind of life. That being the case, I ask you once again. The man posed a question to Ayaka as she lay lamenting the past. It looked like he would not give her time to seriously reflect on how she had come to this point. In this chaotic situation, she made up her mind about just one thing. I can't accept any more deaths. Even if destiny tries to force them on me. Not if it means resisting. Not even if resisting it means dying myself. I'll at least die fighting. It's not like my life is worth anything anyway. May I take it that you are my master? I am, as you can see, of the saber class. If you understand, then let us conclude our contract at what... You're wrong. Closer to half-desperate than to resolute, Ayaka wrung a cry from deep in her throat. Completely wrong. What? The tattoos on her body shone faintly in response to the man's voice, and she realized they were resonating with him. If she agreed to be his master now, she would probably be able to usurp control of the heroic spirit, just like the white woman had told her she would. But she ignored the white woman's designs and glared at the man. I won't do what you people want anymore, she declared, forcing herself not to tremble with fear, and resolved to lay down her life if she had to. Just leave me alone. Ayaka had been sure that she would have been killed by the man's sword the moment she spoke. He was different from the black-robed woman, but she could still sense the power of an extraordinary being completely unlike an ordinary human from the man in front of her. Normal people were probably the same as worms to him, or so Ayaka thought. But contrary to her expectations, he cocked his head as if at a loss, and returned his sword to the sheath as he spoke. I see. So you aren't my master. In that case, I suppose there's nothing to be done. Then he looked at the nearly half-collapsed ceiling and heaved a sigh. Is this a theater? Oh dear. He narrowed his eyes as if he had received a shock of some kind and crossed his arms as if in thought. So modern playhouses are as fragile as that. I suppose the knowledge I got from the throne really isn't enough to really understand. Muttering to himself, the man vanished into the wings of the stage. Ayaka, who had been left behind, let her mouth hang open for a few seconds before a sudden realization struck her. I'm saved? The thought only lasted for a brief moment. Freeze! The man's angry shout came from the entrance. It was a different man from before, but Ayaka was able to identify at once. The men who appeared from the entrance were wearing matching outfits, police uniforms, and aimed riot-control taser guns at Ayaka. They had not drawn their handguns even before the area was deserted, because one glance told them Ayaka was unarmed. Well, you can tell this takes place in an alternate universe, because, let's be real here, they have those guns on them no matter what. They use them no matter what. I mean, they might, because she's blonde, they might not think that she's a minority right away. But dear God, if she had a different color hair, the story would end right here. Put both your hands behind your head and get down on the ground. Slowly. Yes, sir. Ayaka replied unenthusiastically and slowly did as she was told. I'm obviously the victim here, she thought. But when she considered that she was trespassing in a scene of what looked like a terrorist bombing, well, it was probably a natural reaction. And on top of that, the mage's corpse was still lying behind her, and the suspicious altar he had used remained on the stage. Okay, sorry, I just read a line that just blows my mind. We'll get to that. Ayaka thought that this looked like it would turn out to be quite the tangled mess when a thought that it would be difficult for anyone else to understand something crossed her mind. Police stations have elevators, don't they? Oh, how depressing. What? Actually, I might die from the white woman's curse before it comes to that. God, they're not telling us certain things. I'm really curious. While Ayaka was lost in thought, the police officers surrounded her and confirmed that the mage beside her was dead. Hey, did you do this? No, I'm the victim here. Ayaka answered in fluent English. The officer pinning her arms responded. If that's true, what happened here? Why are you in the opera house while it's closed for renovation? Well, you see... Ayaka considered lying that she'd been abducted by the mage, but she would soon be exposed if she checked the local surveillance cameras, and that would only make things more confused. But she could not tell the truth either. The police officers seemed to have concluded that Ayaka's reluctance to speak was indeed suspicious, and one of them produced a pair of handcuffs. You are under arrest for trespassing and suspected terrorism and destruction of property. You have the right to remain... Wow, they actually say it. Ayaka found herself thinking she listened to the Miranda warning she'd often seen in American TV shows. She did not know what would happen next. She was prepared to die, but she would not accept dying while still falsely accused of the mage's murder and the destruction of the opera house. She was still lying face down on the floor as she pondered. When she opened her eyes, there she was again. A young girl wearing a red hood. The police officers did not seem to be able to see her. They passed back and forth through the area where she stood without comment. The red hood was pulled far away, and Ayaka could not make out anything from the nose up. When the girl looked at her, but the girl was looking at her and smiling faintly. She opened her mouth to say something. Ayaka did not want to listen. She did not want to see anymore, but still she could not look away. Ayaka knew why. This was a self-inflicted curse, and it had bound her for years. The girl in the red hood was trying to tell her something when... Wait. A commanding voice reverberated through the opera house. At the same time, the girl in the red hood vanished. When Ayaka and the police officers turned to look in the direction of the voice, they saw a man in resplendent noble garb standing among the solitary VIP seats in a portion of the third floor that had escaped collapse. Huh? That's... Why is he still here? Ayaka wondered, but the man faced Ayaka and the officers and unilaterally declared, I will give testimony. It was not the bespectacled girl who killed the man. Who's there? Don't move! Maybe it was a matter of distance. It was not the tasers the police officers trained on the man, but handguns. The man, however, gave no indication that he cared, and continued to majestically deliver his speech. Incidentally, it was not she who destroyed this theater either. What? I did it. With this sword. The man audibly slapped the scabbard of the sword hanging at his waist as he spoke. The police officers scowled. They signaled to each other with their eyes, and several ran off to the VIP seats where the man was. They did not seem to believe the story that he had done it with the sword, but they did appear to be wary of this man who named himself the culprit. Be careful, he may have planted more bombs. The man seemed to have heard the officer's whispers because he began to sound annoyed. I would prefer not to be lumped in with bombs and... Huh? He broke off mid-sentence. Part of the half-destroyed ceiling had begun to collapse again. Look out! Ayaka mumbled indistinctly. The officers noticed it as well and tried to run, but it did not look like several of them would make it in time. Oh, shut up. I see the next words in the sentence. Shut up. Then the man in the VIP seats laid a hand at the sword of his hip and drew it in a motion reminiscent of Japanese EI. That's like the Virgil style. That's where like you do the whoosh, right? You whip it out and then quickly put it away. The power could hardly compare to his earlier strike, but a streak of light, nevertheless, extended from his blade and smashed the chunk of falling stone to atoms. Both the police officers who had been saved by a hair's breadth without understanding what had happened, and those who had been powerless to do anything from their place of safety, were left blinking in amazement. The man who had accomplished this feat addressed the stunned officers with a regal smile. As he spoke, he turned his gaze on Ayaka for just a moment, and flashed her a little smile. Will this be enough to prove me guilty? The same time, West Snowfield in the forest. I sense a strange presence. Enkidu, the Lancer heroic spirit, who'd spent a day with the Silver Wolf who was his master, turning into the forest, spent a day with his master, turning the forest into a abandoned field, sensed a disturbance in the flow of mana flowing from the city, and muttered wonderingly. 7 souls in service around one powerful one, and another strange soul beside them. I wonder what they could be. The Silver Wolf appeared to intuit Enkidu's tension, and uttered an uneasy whine. Enkidu replied in a soothing voice while stroking his master's back. It's all right. I won't go anywhere tonight. I have a preparation of my own to make so I can face Gil at the end with my full power. In front of the Opera House. We're coming to you live from the city center where part of the Opera House had collapsed. What can have happened to this historic building which boasts more than 50 years of tradition? A reporter for Snowfield's local cable TV station was keeping up live commentary of the partially destroyed Opera House. The reporter, having already interviewed several people, called out to a nearby young man. Excuse me, can I have a moment? Do you happen to know what happened here? Huh? Am I on TV? Oh, wow, I wonder if the professor or Rhinus are watching. The young man in question wore a steampunk-styled wristwatch. Are you a local? Oh, no, I just happen to be here sightseeing, and, I don't know what happened either, but when I was going to bed, my heart suddenly went crazy. When I looked towards the Opera House, there was a big boom, and the wall started crumbling just like that. Your heart went crazy? Yeah, it was a hunch. That's it. The reporter turned to... Honestly... Is this any weirder than half the stuff on American cable news? Is this any weirder than, you know, hide your kids, hide your wife? Like, it's really not. The reporter turned a suspicious eye on the young man, who acted like he was hiding something, but just then, they sensed movement in the direction of the Opera House, softly thanked the young man, and ran off without pressing him further. The police officers who entered the building have just come out. The police have someone in custody. Could it be that the opera house explosion was not an accident but a deliberate plot? The TV camera was filming the group that emerged from the scene and broadcasting the image live to televisions all across Snowfield. Oh my god, this is so wild. They're literally just playing it. The image of the youth in an anachronistic costume who came out handcuffed by the police. God, they just showed the servant to everyone on TV. The same time, Northwest Snowfield, Colesman Special Corrections Center. Good grief. This has got to be a real nuisance. I mean, trouble at the summoning of the all-important Saber. This was supposed to fall under Miss Francesca's jurisdiction. Perhaps her bad habit had reared its head again. Valdius heaved a sigh, but then began to contact various locations, as if to say that this degree of trouble was within expectations. It's me. The incident at the Opera House is to be reported as an accident. Some paints used in the renovation caught fire and... He had gotten that far when his words abruptly trailed off. Excuse me, I'll be in touch again later. He ended the call and turned his gaze to one of his banks of countless monitors, a screen that displayed the local cable broadcast. When he saw what was being shown, he initially wondered if a hostile mage might not have been showing him some sort of illusion. Any mage well versed in the Holy Grail War would probably have harbored the same doubt. After all, local cable station it might be, but a genuine heroic spirit was being shown on live video broadcast. Oh my god, this is so good. This is so good. In front of the Opera House, the buzzing crowd of onlookers turned to look at one another when they caught sight of the youth's anachronistic appearance. To all appearances, it was the costume of an actor who had been preparing for a performance. Maybe gas or something had exploded during the rehearsal? When they considered the incident with the desert pipeline that had been reported that morning, many of the onlookers were still inclined to think it an accident. Even the reporter began thinking it would not have been a crime at all, but some mishap during renovation. However, the man, being led by the police, suddenly leapt forward, still handcuffed, and reached the top of the tallest vehicle there, a fire engine, in a few mere bounds. Oh my god. The crowd was taken aback by the fact that the man had dashed up the engine without using his hands at all, relying only on the strength of his legs. The flustered police officers pointed tasers at him, and amid the noise and tumult, "Hear me, people of Snowfield!" Oh my god. Okay, so we get a good look at him. Blonde hair. Let me zoom out a bit. Right, we get... we really can't zoom in out too much. There we go. So we got the blonde hair, right? We got the red streaks. The outfit is... It's like traditional armor, but he's got the red cloak. He does have a little Padawan tail, right? He has... Yeah, I mean, just like a... pretty bog standard sort of design, if you ask me. So, alright. The man's voice carried strangely far. Having destroyed your theater, a sacred place in which to recite poetry and perform tales, we are oh my god, he uses the royal we. We are overcome with shame. Everything is due to our negligence. We will make no excuse. Like a direct bolt to the brain, the meaning of the words easily penetrated the minds of all who heard it. But in lieu of explanation, we will make you a promise. We swear by the great ancestor of our chivalry, Ancestor, okay. Ancestor. Honestly, I don't know enough about the later King Arthur timeline that I don't know who could be still. We swear by the great ancestor of our chivalry, Arthur Pendragon, and by the great knights, the songs of whose victories resound in our native land, that, on our honor, we will compensate you for the destruction of this theater. The townspeople listened in awed silence. It could hardly be called a speech. It had not even filled 30 seconds. When they considered only the meaning of the words, they were inclined to laugh it off as nonsense. But, coming from the man's mouth, the words were accompanied by a mysterious ring of truth that shook the ears and hearts of the crowd. That's his charisma skill, I'm sure. Could he really repay them for the opera house? Just, who was this man? Thank you for your courteous attention. We pray that your lives will be full of most excellent song. Doubtful silence reigned. Having said his piece, the man dismounted the fire engine contentedly. Then, just like that, he was bundled into a patrol car and taken away. No one spoke. Everyone was overwhelmed by the atmosphere the man had projected. Except for one person, the young man who had been interviewed earlier. He turned to the watch on his arms, eyes shining, and clapped as he whispered, "Amazing! Cool! I bet he's the king of someplace! Oh, talk about charisma! Oh, Jack, I've got it! Let's make it so you really were the king of someplace, too!" Well, there certainly are numerous theories that I might actually be royalty, but is that really what we should be thinking about after our first sight of a heroic spirit, one of our enemies in the flesh? I have a feeling that he left several clues to his true name just now. King Arthur and so on? Oh no, it'll be so much more fun and exciting to find out who he is later. I know, let's not fight him, and let's make friends instead. I mean, he's so cool. I have grown genuinely uneasy about whether you understand the meaning of the Holy Grail War. While the pair of heroic spirit and master conversed, a bespectacled female inconspicuously emerged, still not handcuffed, and was made to board a patrol car. The onlookers' heads were still full of the man who had appeared shortly before, and most failed to notice her. Only that young master, Flat Escardos, displayed any unusual reaction. Huh? Is something the matter? No, that person just now. Maybe it was just my imagination. Flat looked after the patrol car, head tilted to one side, and maintained the attitude that he resumed his telepathic conversation with the heroic spirit. Well, I say telepathy, but Flat was actually speaking out loud, and so came to be regarded by onlookers as a dangerous guy who gets worked up and talks to himself. Thus, although it was only a matter of a few minutes, to the citizens of Snowfield, the mystery man's speech was an unforgettable event, not only to onlookers who were at the scene, but also to those who had heard his voice over the local cable station, and to the mages who had been peering through familiars and surveillance cameras as well. The same time, Northwest Snowfield, Colesman Special Corrections Center. Good grief, this is more than just unexpected. Faced with a worrisome situation, Faldius, one of the driving forces behind the fake Holy Grail War, shook his head and sighed. So much for aiding and abetting their escape. He was supposed to learn about the secrecy of magecraft from the Grail as soon as he was summoned. Watching the cable broadcast and the footage transmitted to him through familiars at the same time, Faldius was at his wits' ends. We were fully prepared to make enemies of the association and the church. We spread the word to the mages, but who could have imagined a heroic spirit would go on TV and promise reparations to ordinary citizens? Faldius grumbled, seemingly to his subordinate Alundra. Isn't that a video game? I think Alundra is a video game. Who was beside him and gave a little shake of his head. He'd only sensed the man's presence through familiars, but he was unmistakably a heroic spirit. If he'd assumed spirit form, the police wouldn't be able to see him, much less handcuff him. What the hell is he thinking? Faldius then turned his attention to the bespectacled woman who had quietly emerged after the man. A tattooed woman. It was the woman who arrived in town half a day before, the one tattooed with designs that resembled command seals. Still, I'm sure it reported to Miss Francesca that she was headed for the opera house. A number of misgivings occurred to Faldius as he sighed and wondered what he had bothered raising the surveillance level for. What if allowing herself to be arrested by the police is part of this woman's plan? What happened to Kashura, the mage in charge of Saber? Taken out by this woman? Is it possible that she suspects the police station is in league with us and is using this to get her heroic spirit inside? No. Even if she is, there still has to be some other way. The questions were endless, but Faldius judged that pondering them now would produce no answers. Is this still within your calculations then, Miss Francesca? He muttered, staring vexedly up at the ceiling. Somewhere. Oh, honestly, it's inconceivable, unexpected, completely unforeseen, but I suppose it's things like this that make life worth living. What fun! Ha 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 ha! Francesca was alone in the dark room, rolling with laughter. Hee hee! Ha ha ha! Ya ha ha! Oh, no more, it's too good. My spleen and bile ducts will get all twisted up. She lay face up, flapping her feet with a heartfelt smile. All the while, Francesca was shouting, her cheeks flushed with excitement. I've watched so many Grail Wars. So many Grail Wars. Huh. But even I've never seen a servant get arrested by the police before. I don't know why Art didn't show up even though we used that medium, but I don't even care. Do you mean Arthur or Artoria? Huh. She went on laughing for another 3 minutes. After that, she staggered to her feet, wiping the tears from her eyes, and turned her gaze to the crystal ball. Reflected in it was a scene of that saber being made to get out of the patrol car and taken inside the police station. Oh, I see. That's how it is. Francesca went on happily talking to herself, nodding in apparent agreement with something. That other master must at least know that he's a heroic spirit in the station now, so they'll all be gunning for the police. Oh, how dreadful. I'll be snacking and cheering on from here, so do your best, Mr. Police Chief. The same time, the police station. That's King Arthur. The chief of police, Orlando Reeve, spread his office blinds with his fingers and peered out at the parking lot. He saw that the heroic spirit, apparently Saber, was walking too majestically for someone being hauled in, and sighed with his usual sour look. I see we didn't send out clan. How do you say Calatin? I'm gonna say just Calatin. I don't know how it goes. I see we didn't send out Clan Calatin in time. It happened in the city center. Apparently, some officers on patrol rushed in before they could take care of it. His secretary replied coolly. When she finished, she asked the chief about future developments. How do we proceed? Deal with them inside the station? Assemble the members of Clan Calatin here, but first, investigate the woman who was brought in. Find out if she's a master or not. Depending on the circumstances, we may be able to form an alliance. An alliance, sir? If, what Francesca told us is correct, that should be King Arthur, but on TV he swore by Arthur Pendragon, didn't he? Yes, sir. We also received a report to that effect from the officers who were at the scene. In that case, doesn't swearing by yourself seem strange to you? You could always be a hero linked to Arthur, a knight of the Round Table, but whenever he comes from, we can't expect to challenge Saber and come out unscathed. He managed to fire his noble phantasm even once in the time between our taking care of his master and him disappearing. It'll mean trouble. The chief clasped his hands over his desk, concealing his mouth as he continued. To begin with, if that woman is enough of a mage to steal the right to be Saber's master, it's only natural for her to have some kind of plan. God, people think that she's done so much where she's just fallen into these situations. I don't know about that, sir. It's also possible that she's an amateur and only knows the rudiments of magecraft. A puppet of the Einsburns? The preceding evening, they had received a report that an Einsburn homunculus had entered the city. Faldius and Francesca were probably aware of it as well, but the chief had not yet exchanged information with them on that point. But even if the Einsburns were making no direct moves, there's a real possibility they were employing some outside mage. If they feared betrayal, they could always find some means of manipulating an amateur who merely possessed magic circuits to do their bidding. Also consider the possibility that Francesca, not the Einsburns, is behind her. That woman would betray us in 5 seconds if she thought it would be fun. Faldius is allied with her, but even he could turn on us depending on the inclination of his superiors. The chief continued with slightly downcast eyes, recalling the clash of heroic spirits in the desert and the giant crater that had been born as a result. In any case, as long as we have not only Gilgamesh, but another heroic spirit capable of facing him on equal footing to deal with, we can't have too much insurance. Then, looking to the future. From the dual standpoints of police chief and master, Orlando dispassionately issued instructions to his secretary. Keep a watchful eye on both the woman and the heroic spirit. For the time being, choose detectives who don't know the circumstances and treat them as strangely dressed suspects in a possible terrorism case. Lastly, he added the most personally important of his instructions. Don't neglect Castor's surveillance. You know what he's like. If he hears about this, he's entirely capable of trying to take over the investigation himself. Actually, there was a request from Mr. Castor a little while ago. Let me play in the casino. again. Denied. See to it that his meals meet his demands and nothing else. The chief replied immediately to his secretary's matter-of-fact report, his face still expressionless. As she departed, he muttered exasperatedly, fingers on his temples. Good lord. What kind of heroic spirit goes to a casino when there's a war on? Snowfield! Crystal Hill Casino Hotel! That's really funny. Crystal Hill was the tallest building in Snowfield. It was also a first-class hotel and home to the largest casino in the city. I swear to God, if Teen Shelk and her, clan are so rich and powerful because, of course, the natives own a casino, that would be so rad. It was said that the breadth and luxury of its facilities were a match for even the finest Las Vegas casinos. Of course, true gambling enthusiasts still tended to head to Las Vegas across the desert to Snowfield South. Okay, I need to look at a American map. Okay, so Las Vegas is in Nevada, right? So Nevada desert map. If I take a look at the map of the Nevada desert, right? So that means that, all right, and I need to just see Nevada. Where's Vegas? Vegas is, I don't know. I don't actually know where Vegas is. I'm looking at a map right now. Okay, so Vegas is, okay, Vegas is way in the south, right? So that means that if Vegas is to the south, I'm currently looking at a map of, okay, so there's Vegas. So that means, because it specifically says, across the desert to Snowfield South. So that doesn't sound to me like it's actually in the desert. It sounds like the desert is south there. So that means that there is a non-zero chance that Snowfield is in Idaho or possibly Oregon, right? Or it's just very North Nevada. Okay, interesting. Okay. Because I was kind of wondering where it was. For some reason, I kept thinking that it's in New York, but no, I just got confused with the whole Gil in New York FGO event. Okay. Of course, still headed to Las Vegas. Even so, the millionaires who congregated in the young boomtown loved it well enough, and Snowfield's largest entertainment facility, Crystal Hill, was majestically enshrined in the city's center. In the corner of that casino, a grand wager was about to unfold. Although as far as the betting was concerned, it was a mere diversion. Everything on red. At the carelessly spoken words, a mountain of chips were moved onto the roulette table. A quiet stir ran through the expensively dressed people around it, and turned to see who had placed such an extravagant wager. This is so good. The man in the center of their gazes, Gilgamesh, the archer heroic spirit, sat in his chair at the roulette table, plain for all to see. He did not even seem to be particularly enjoying himself. Though he sat gracefully, the piercing look in his eyes seemed to appraise the dealer's skill. He looked less like a first-class gambler than he did the owner of the casino. Unusually, his hair was slicked down, and he wore not his golden armor, but a suit in a flashy cut. That's amazing. Gilgamesh, who had no sooner arrived at the casino than he had racked up a string of big wins, naturally attracted stares. He was now dealing in the sums that would give even a minor millionaire pause. Before long, cheers and applause broke out as the roulette ball landed on a... He's using his frickin' golden rule, isn't he? Cheers and applause broke out as the roulette ball landed on a red number. The corners of Gilgamesh's mouth turned up slightly, but his improved spirits seemed purely to be in response to admiration, rather than to have made a large profit. He casually grasped a handful of the highest value chips he had acquired and rose from his seat, leaving a sum almost 50 times the winnings of the average gambler behind him. He accepted a cocktail glass from a passing waitress and swished the drink in his mouth as he made his way to a more sparsely populated area. "Hardly fit to drink," he muttered to himself. "I'm sorry," a girl's voice sounded inside his head. "You have no need to apologize." Gilgamesh, still holding the cocktail in his mouth, replied telepathically. Standing motionless beside him was Tina Shelk, his master. Persons under 21 years of age were forbidden from entering the casinos in the state, and violations carried harsh penalties for the offending casino. Yet, no one questioned Tina's presence. No one so much as looked in her direction. "Well, no one should be able to see you." Maybe because there was no one nearby, or maybe because telepathy was simply not to his liking, Gilgamesh spoke aloud except when sipping his drink. "Yes, your majesty. The blessing of this ring are truly wonderful." "Oh, interesting." On her finger, Tina wore a ring engraved with the script of ancient Sumer. "It's nothing grand enough to call a blessing. Merely a trinket that wards off prying eyes. The mongrel rabble is one thing, but it is not powerful enough to deceive the eyes of a mage or a servant." For about half a day after making the gigantic crater in the desert, Gilgamesh had gone somewhere off with a parting, "At least to defend yourself on your own." Tina could sense the mana that linked them, so she had known that he had not vanished to resolve the contract, but she had not the slightest idea what he was doing. Once night fell, Tina and the others who had been with her on the north side of town had returned to the headquarters of the Protectors of the Land, and there he had been, having procured civilian clothing from somewhere and wearing an expression of apparent ill humor beneath his slicked-down bangs. "Show me the place in this city where the most people and riches gather." As a result, Tina had taken Gilgamesh to Crystal Hill, the city's #1 casino in the entertainment district that surrounded it. She could not fathom his intentions, but she had no reason to disobey. The city's center could be called her enemy's base, and if she was an ordinary mage, she might have hesitated to go there. While Tina understood the situation, she felt little unease. She had complete faith in the power Gilgamesh had displayed in the desert the previous night, so much that she worried that she might become a hindrance to him. Then, when Tina had been stopped by the clerk in charge of the entrance of the casino, Gilgamesh had handed her that ring. "If someone can see you, it means they possess considerable powers of observation. I leave the treatment of any except thieves with their eyes on the Holy Grail for you, my master, to decide. They are none of my concern." Understood. Tina bobbed her head respectfully, then addressed Gilgamesh concerning his recent exploits. "Still, the skill you have displayed this past hour had been truly magnificent." "Skill had nothing to do with it. All the riches of my garden returned to me in the end. To me, gambling is the same as shifting money from my treasury to my purse. The act may be meaningful, but it is not a game to take pleasure in," Gilgamesh answered with a look of boredom, flipping the valuable chips he held into the air as he spoke. The heroic spirit in modern dress surveyed his surroundings afresh as he continued. "But this is the greatest flow of wealth this city has to offer. I judged that the banks and stock exchange would not present the sights your majesty desired, and excluded them." "I see. Still, it will do. This amusement center exchanges one currency for another, building a world of its own." "A world?" "Yes. Money is the ultimate invention, a spell that has brought maturation and decadence to the mongrels at the same time. I do not despise it myself. It is such a fine thing, yet its greatest use is waste." Comical. Gilgamesh shrugged his shoulders and laughed as he spoke. It appeared that this heroic spirit had a fondness for luxury. Even his present attire exuded an aura best summed up by the phrase, "A youngster who had gotten his hands on a fortune, couldn't use it up in Vegas and gotten carried away." In contrast to Gilgamesh, who seemed strangely at home, Tina had never set foot in a casino before. She was uneasily surveying her surroundings while his voice sounded in her ear. "No woman who would use my power should quail at anything but me." "I'm sorry. I'm certain I told you already. Children should act like children, bright-eyed at whatever meets their gaze. Of course, all the world must appear dim in my presence." Gil has a very good view of children. Gil is very much like, children should be happy and full of wonder. And it's an interesting thing, and we see that in like the Babylonia anime when he plays a board game with the children. It's so good. As your majesty says. Unable to tell if Gilgamesh was joking or in earnest, Tine merely bowed her head. Gilgamesh, seeing that, narrowed his eyes in apparent displeasure. I do not mind you showing me deference. It is only natural, but do not put faith in me blindly. If your eyes can shine, use them to see your way. Huh? No, not only me. Be it God or this nature's blessing you speak of, or the cherished wish of generations of ancestors, it makes no difference. Abandoning thought to revere or depend on something means letting your soul fall into decay. An insolent one who would bluntly try to make a stepping stone of me, though unpleasant, would still be a worthier partner. When he got to the cherished wish of generations of ancestors, Tina realized that she herself was being indicated and stiffened. Gilgamesh emptied his glass as he questioned her. Which are you, mongrel girl? Is retaking the land from mages your will? Or do you speak as another's puppet, abandoning choice and making fate your excuse? As long as my friend is here, I intend to amuse myself with the jest, this holy grail war. If you do cast aside your childishness and try to make use of me, you must be prepared to bear your true character. That was as far as Tine managed to get in her telepathic response. She did not have an answer to Gilgamesh's question, at least not now. She was prepared to risk her life. She was also prepared to kill. She already had blood on her hands. But whether that was her own will, or whether she was being swept along by the muddy stream of fate, that's a good metaphor for fate and Gil, if you know what I'm saying. Even she did not know. She had never seriously considered the question until Gilgamesh asked her. Well, no matter. Many of the people of Uruk were emotionally mature by your age, but I cannot expect as much of the mongrels of this era. It looked as if Gilgamesh had really not wanted an answer, and he did not force Tine to continue the conversation. After one final remark, he directed his steps towards another gambling table. Those who offer up their souls to something of their own firm will, however, I command. Perhaps he was remembering someone in particular. A nostalgic smile played across his lips, even if they are the sort the mongrels call mad. Somewhere in the city, inside a building under construction, the partially constructed building stood on a site slightly removed from central snowfield. Under normal circumstances, it would be deserted at night, after the construction people had gone. Now, however, a black-robed woman, the servant assassin, had erected her barrier there, and ordinary humans could no longer so much as perceive the entrance. As she rested her body, the woman assassin silently closed her eyes and clenched her teeth. Although she had been caught up in Saber's powerful strike, there was not a single wound on her. Perhaps she employed some kind of secret technique. Nonetheless, she still knew neither her opponent's fighting strength, nor his noble phantasm, nor even his true name. Her temporary withdrawal had probably been tactically correct. Tactically, yep. Yet, the fact that she had retreated in the face of an enemy at all had sunk her heart into a deep abyss. The man had known about the old man of the mountain. Who is he? How much does he know of the techniques of the great chiefs? He's among those led astray by the Holy Grail, that much is certain. I must think of a plan for dealing with him. If that Saber had been a man whose only skill was unleashing powerful slashes of light, she could have dealt with him as things stood by, making liberal use of her own noble phantasm. The possibility of using up her mana and vanishing as a result would be high, but she would have no regrets about that. She had not yet noticed the flow of mana that still linked her to her master. The woman assassin cemented her resolve as she devised countermeasures for the man. She sensed an air of unrest ever since Saber had been summoned. Just before he had appeared, there certainly had been multiple presence in the light. Some of them had clearly been unhuman. Later, all the figures had coalesced into one, but there was the arrow that had knocked away the arm of her delusional heartbeat, Zamania. But Saber did not appear to have fired it. Furthermore, the arrow had been laced with a powerful poison. Because she acquired resistance as a result of her training, it had no effect on her, but it would have numbed the sinews of an ordinary person, rendering them immobile. The man had not been the type to use poison for preference. There was still the mystery of why the arrow had flown out of his shadow. That meant she could not fight him recklessly. Her own immaturity had prevented her from calling down the inevitable death on her opponent. If one of the great chiefs had been in her position, they surely would be able to reap the mysterious heroic spirit's life without raising an eyebrow. Her own inability to accomplish that was proof of her own immaturity. How should I deal with that man? There was a noble phantasm related to her poison resistance, a technique of scattering poison that the chief called the Tranquil had once employed. I'm guessing this is... well... Serenity, Tranquil. Is that like the connection, right? Probably. But that would also affect people other than her target. In life, she had ceaselessly trained herself for the duties of an assassin, but all of that was for bringing ruin to the enemies of the faith, not for massacring innocent people. There may have been co-religious of hers among those who walked the city, and even if they were not, there might be some who one day might have a change of heart and convert. So, are we to assume her religion is Islam? Is that... are they just avoiding saying that, or is there something else? Right? Let's go. Hassan Fate Religion. Let's see here. Hassani Sabah's real-world religion was Shia Islam. Okay. Okay. I'm assuming at least. Interesting. Okay, Hassani Sabah is the founder of what became known as Nizari Ismailism. So, okay. The Nizari state was a Shia Nizari Ismaili state founded by Hassani Sabah after he took control of Alamut Castle in 1090 AD. Okay. So it's their own branch. It's a type of Shia Islamism. Are there people who still practice this? I'm curious. It's the largest segment of Ismaili Muslims. We're the second largest branch of Shia. Early history, origin, succession. So I'm just reading here. Further contemporary history. Yep. No, it is still kind of around. Okay. Very, very interesting. Okay. I'm probably grossly oversimplifying a very difficult matter. She had spent the day seeking out and challenging the many mages who had infiltrated Snowfield. As they were all clearly infidels, she had reaped the lives of any... So yeah, that's one thing that I got from it. It's a jihadist one, so it's the idea of anyone who doesn't believe should, probably die. Or, if you don't think they'll convert one day. As long as they were not involved with the Holy Grail War, the mages were not definitely marked for death, but she had no reason to overlook those who sought her life. Most of the mages who had not been hostile had no sooner learned that she was a servant than they had begun to proposition her. I'll manage the control seals somehow, so make a contract with me. Let's go after the Grail together. Once we have the Grail, you can wish for whatever you want. She stabbed their tongues so they would not be able to speak such depravities for a while. When it came to mages who had only come to enjoy the spectacle, she had simply left them with the warning. The ritual in the city is a heresy against nature. Have nothing to do with it. If she had more time, she would have taken the opportunity to recommend conversion. Oh my god, she's literally trying to convert them. But at the present, she had no such luxury. Eliminate the ones behind this Holy Grail war. That is my only duty. She switched her thoughts to another track, stood on the edge of a building, and flung her body high into the city night. She could still sense many mages, and they showed no sign of running out. It was her task to search out the masterminds of the Holy Grail from among them. of the Holy Grail war from among them and give them just retribution for their slight to the chiefs. The same time, on a rooftop, the woman assassin's master, Jester Karchor, watched over her from afar, grinning ecstatically. He rattled on to himself, slowly clapping his hands. Ah, magnificent! You were fully justified in your retreat, yet you still feel shame at your own maturity, but such pride is for kings and knights to worry about, not you! Still, the sight of your shame is truly beautiful. Jester was among those who had witnessed the events in the Opera House from the shadows. He completely erased his presence and witnessed the affair from beginning to end. He could say with certainty that there was something unusual about the heroic spirit who appeared to be Saber. As far as the assassin's master was concerned, she had slim chance of victory, noble phantasms excluded. That's the wrong noble, but that's fine. Nobel phantasm? Like a Nobel prizes? You would almost certainly have lost in a head-to-head firefight, but not to fear, you are an assassin. Seek your opening from the shadows and deal him certain death from behind, upholding the honor of what you believe in through such dishonorable means as your very way of life. Jester described her way of fighting to suit himself and praised her life to suit himself. He danced around and round in the darkness alone, literally jumping for joy. What purity! To think there was such a promising fruit left in the human race. All mankind should watch her life, comprehend it, sympathize with it, and learn from her example. No, I tell a lie. She is too good for mere humans. I alone am fit to savor her with my eyes, to break her, to devour her. Once he had finished shouting his boundless egoism, Jester surveyed the city lights that stood out in the darkness of night below him, and licked his lips with barely suppressed excitement. How could I let anyone else have her, even those fiendish heroic spirits in the desert? Or to the new swordsman, I will permit them to torment her, by all means make her despair, but it must be I who eats her in the end. At that point, Jester stopped grinning for a moment and narrowed his eyes as he turned his attention to the darkness of night itself, as if he were glaring at something human eyes could not see. Cursed servant of the planet, surround yourself with your burden of death if you will, but I won't surrender that girl, even to you. A dream. Ryder has no mind. A system for carrying death to humans. That was his true nature. While his master, Kuraoka Tsubaki, was sunk in peaceful slumber, Ryder dreamed as well. A process of recalling what had transpired that day and sorting out the information he had accumulated. There was no desire nor regret in it. It was no more or less than data sorting for the purpose of abiding by the Holy Grail system and guarding the safety and wishes of his master. Almost a full day had passed since the events in the desert. The data Ryder was sorting was largely the same as had been the day before, but several birds now flew in the dream world. He recalled Tsubaki rejoicing at the sight of them. Birdies! Hey, did you bring me these birdies too? Thank you. I love animals. Tsubaki's guileless words were played over and over again. In the past day, that was the moment that the girl, his master, had been most excited. This was the course his master wished for. Having confirmed that, Ryder began to do his duty. He acted so as to ensure that, in case his interpretation turned out to differ from Tsubaki's, he would be able to correct his course immediately. Slowly, and so, silently, brutally, he began to spread throughout the town. Oh my god. Okay, so hold up. The birds are the ones that got taken in by the death, right? And so when they die, they get added to this world. And because Tsubaki wants people in this world. Oh boy. Somewhere in the city, surrounded by mountains of old-looking books, Castor was resting his feet on his desk and staring at the screen of a notebook computer with an excited grin. Oh, so when you put the notes and lyrics into the computer, the little lady in the picture sing... He's playing with Vocaloid? What the hell? Oh, what a time to be alive. The Grail War's got nothing on this. He's literally playing with a He's playing with HATSUNE Miku. He fiddled with the computer for a while, rattling on in that vein all the while. At last, a bizarre tune, such as to waste the capabilities of that sophisticated software, became audible from the computer. Once he listened to it all the way through, he tried listening to songs made by other people for comparison. Then he nodded as if he convinced himself of something. Yeesh. My violin teacher told me back when I was a brat, but I guess I really ain't got any musical talent. Can't do anything about that. Might as well still focus on the Grail War. With a sigh, he switched the image on the computer screen. A stream of highly classified information, such would never normally be found lying around the internet, flashed upon it. Confirmed that all birds utilized as familiars have been revived from an apparent death state. Oh. Interesting. They appeared to be reports from an organization connected to Snowfield, a long succession of sentences sprinkled with mage terminology. Confirmed that all functionality as familiars have been lost to abnormal spots in various places. No pathogens discovered, but confirmed faint trace of magical energy possessing unusual properties, interpretable as both odd, mana and odd. Conjecture that the birds we failed to recover have similarly revived. Case category upgraded to C class. Further developments under the jurisdiction of Mr. Faldius Dioland. Dioland. His name is Godland. Oh boy. Following such disquieting statements, still more bizarre documents and footage from Snowfield's local cable station appeared on the screen. Receiving information, the police have secured one heroic spirit, thought to be Saber. Ha! For real? Looks like we got another weirdo on our hands, Caster cackled, playing back what looked to be a video recording. When he saw the figure addressing the public, his eyes widened. He clapped his hands together and rocked his chair back and forth as he shouted, "Looks like the station's saddled with another troublemaker." Then he blurted out his words of compassion for his master, mingled with sarcastic laughter. "Too bad for the chief. Guy could get an ulcer from this." Caster spoke as though it was all someone else's problem, kept on talking to himself, carefree to the end as he perused still more information. "Now for the kickoff of a fun 7 days. They say it took God that long to make the world, but so let's see what these guys can whip up." Then, just a little regretfully, but still grinning, Caster slowly shook his head from side to side. "I'd at least like to hold out long enough to see the finale with my own eyes, but I guess I've only got 7 days too." Caster rocked his creaking chair hard and looked around at the high pile of books, flashing a self-mocking smile and laughing under his breath. "If I was the great Shakespeare, I'd write up the story playing out in front of me, but I think I'll do my best to kick back in the gallery and enjoy the show. Smoking hot babes and tasty grub included. Ha ha!" I still have no idea, I swear to God, if you're Mark Twain. Alright. Dang. Dang, dang, dang. Dang. This was a really good chapter. I mean, there was a bit of weird translation stuff at the very beginning that was a bit confusing and not great. But the actual chapter itself, there's a lot here that's really good. This is so good. Once again, I'm out here screaming that Strange Fake is like probably the best. It's so good. It's so good. How's it so good? I can't believe he used HATSUNE MIKU. Anyways, thank you all for watching, guys. And, do I want to put Drip Gill or do I want to put HATSUNE MIKU in the thumbnail? I feel like more people would be like shocked by HATSUNE MIKU. I might have to do that. All right, guys. That's it for today's reading. We've read the first 36 pages or so. I'm excited for more. I hope you are too. We'll see you guys next time for some more. Let's read Fate's Strange Fake Volume 2. Ciao.